So the other day I did a video where I talked about the 3 languages of business that you have to learn to speak if you want to be successful. We talked about the language of people, we talked about the language of money, and the language of the machines. Now, in the comments, somebody came along and they're like, so of those 3 languages, which is the most valuable? If you had to only learn to be fluent in one of those, which would it be? And the answer is very simple: the language of people. That is the most important language any of us can learn to speak, even if you're not an entrepreneur. If you're a W-2 employee, you're working with and through other people. Like, the quality of your life is often most impacted. It is not just most often. It's absolutely, unequivocally most impacted by the quality of your relationships and your ability to work with and through other people. Harvard, I think it was Harvard that did a study where they found the correlation between your ultimate life satisfaction is most tightly correlated with your relationship with your significant other. It's like a 1.8 or something like that correlation, or a 0.8 correlation, where it's pretty much a 1-to-1. If you have a great relationship with your partner, you're going to have a great life. If you don't, you're not. It's just that simple. But we can extrapolate this out into business, your ability to work with your employees, your vendors, your customers. That is the game of business in a nutshell, because if there are no other people involved in the equation, there is no need for a business, right? A business is the exchange of goods and services for other goods and services, or money or whatever, right? And if there are no people in the equation, why do it? You don't need it. Like, bears don't have a bartering system. They just go out there in the woods and they do what bears do. So if you want to get ahead, if you want to be successful, you have to learn the language of people. And specifically, we call this psychology. Now, there's a lot of different ways of learning the language of people, but I want to focus on psychology in particular, and 5 of the things that you get from learning psychology and studying it very deeply. So let's dive in. Number 1, the first thing that you get from studying psychology are mental models. Mental models are ways of conceptualizing information, conceptualizing new data that you receive about the universe, to compare it and pattern match it against other things that you've already experienced, and then come to quick resolutions and quick insights about that thing. Now, mental models, specifically where other people are concerned, is valuable because people think almost entirely in patterns and in systems. And if you can understand the root structures of that, then you're going to understand how people come to their beliefs, come to their opinions on different topics and subjects, right? So that's number 1, mental models. Very powerful, not just for people, but you can apply these to everything. But specifically, the thing I like here is when you learn the language of people in psychology, mental models, you also learn how to speak to yourself. And so keep that in mind as we go through these other 4 areas. All right, number 2, second area of psychology to study are cognitive biases. Daniel Kahneman, in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, identified, I think, 26 cognitive biases. These are the mistakes that we make in our interpretation of the world of facts. It's our brains, the fuse in our brains, tripping this wire, and we no longer think rationally or logically about a situation. So for example, one example of this would be what's called loss aversion theory, which just says that we will react more negatively to losing something than we would react positively to gaining that equivalent thing. So for instance, you would take the loss of $100 more painfully than you would experience the joy of gaining $100. So you will work harder to not lose $100 than you would work to gain $100. It's functionally $100. It's the same thing. So you should work just as hard for the 2, and yet you will work harder to not lose than you will to gain. And that is a very powerful little insight about human behavior. So that's the second area of psychology I would study. Mental models, number 1. Second are cognitive biases. So you can understand where people are acting irrationally. Not just people, but you too. You do the same thing. And understanding that about yourself is very, very valuable. Number 3, I think everybody should study the art of influence, of persuasion, manipulation too, if you want to call it that, right? Because by understanding what leads to people being influenced or persuaded or manipulated, you can make your ideas more potent, you can rally more people behind you, or you can avoid being taken advantage of. Very, very powerful things. And I've probably recommended this book 100 times on this podcast already, but best book I've ever read on this subject is Influence by Robert Cialdini. The 4th area of psychology everybody should study is peak performance. So getting the most out of your potential, the most out of your concentration, the most out of your focus, the most out of your mental powers depends on your ability to get into the right state of mind. and the knowledge of what it takes to manipulate your biology so that your psychology follows is what separates, in a lot of cases, the top performers from just really good performers. The top performers know how to show up and win and be at their best even when they don't feel like being at their best. And so study peak performance, study top athletes, top performers, top CEOs, study the psychology of what it takes to operate at peak mental capacity, because that is your most definitive advantage in this very competitive world. So that's number 4. Last but not least is study empathy. Learn empathy through psychology, because again, your ability to put yourself in the position of somebody else and see the world, see the universe through their unique lens is invaluable. Everybody going through the world right now sees the universe through their own eyes. It is unique to them. And everybody, therefore, thinks that they are the center of their universe, because in a very real way that they are. And so you are just a bit character in their movie, in the story of their life. You are not the main character in their life. And yet for you, you are. And so it's kind of hard to even conceptualize that. And so a lot of the slights, a lot of the things that people do that hurt us, we aren't actually the subject of that activity, the thing that they tried, the thing that they did. They did it because it was moving them towards their goals and their ambitions, their whatever, trying to avoid their pain. And you, as a bit character, as an NPC in the story of their life, are the collateral damage, right? And so being able to see that, to see the world from other people's perspective, to understand why they do what they do, isn't just useful in your ability to work with them, but to also not carry the baggage of hurt that comes along inevitably, all the emotional shrapnel you'll inflict on others and be inflicted upon by them. And so those are 5 areas of psychology that I would recommend that you dive into, that you learn: mental models, cognitive biases, influence, peak performance, and empathy. You do that, you will learn to speak the language of people, and that will serve you incredibly well in the game of business and the game of life. So that's going to do it for me, guys and gals. We'll see you in the next episode.